Hello and welcome to Scarves Around the Funnel, the podcast dedicated to Heart of Midlothian Football Club. No On the Whistle this week, no following day podcast either. I've been away for a couple of days with the family, which I think is a good thing because the On the Whistle thing, sometimes you say stuff that you either haven't seen bigger picture or you say some things that you've seen and not many others do. I don't mind the fact that it's been a couple of days since Hearts faced Rangers at Ibrox. With me to dissect that is Mr. Scott McIntosh. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, similar mindset to you. I think if we'd recorded something straight off the bat on Sunday evening, I think the disappointment and the frustration aspects of not only our result, but the result earlier on in the day at Rugby Park would have just probably consumed and sort of made up a bigger part of the show than maybe we would have liked. So I think having a couple of days to mull that over and think about the positives, I've got three straight away that I can think of. Ocean McAtee has spent a couple of days with our medical team, and it's not a hamstring injury that they've came back with, so that's a positive. Uh, we've got the likes of Barry Mackay and Joel Newbley coming back to Scottish football at the weekend, just in time to put a spanner in the works for Rangers. And then obviously we've got our very own Ryan McGowan that I'm sure will be doing his best in that fixture as well. And then we've got our neighbours going to Parkhead on Saturday, and I'm sure they will be itching to finally lay a glove on one half of the old firm this season. So I'm sure they'll be doing their utmost to get 3 points.
I want to bring up a tweet that you posted. Not one of the ones where you went fishing, because you've kind of been reverse fishing this week. You've had a few rods dangled in front of you, but you've refused to bite. We'll not talk about Kevin McKenna's tweet either
I was
in
going to
depth.
say, you stole my thunder. I was going to say I've been trying to sell the film rights to some major studios and sort of
The
Hollywood.
underdog story.
The problem is they don't
Goodness.
understand the twist where I tell them that the team with the £200,000 net spend are the team that are the favourites and the other two are the underdogs. They don't quite figure that one out, but fucking
Yeah,
unreal. The narrative that's been getting pushed. And
right.
I don't mind that the narrative's been getting pushed. I think Danny Rule and Martin O'Neill and anyone connected within Rangers and Celtic, including the fans, I think are right to push that narrative if it means that it gives them a lift or a bit of momentum. What I hate is that it doesn't get pushed back against by the journalists. That's what
Hmm.
annoys me. When
I
Danny
get
Rule
that.
says that on Friday, that should have at least been pushed back by your Scott McDermott's or your Andy Newport's, whoever was there representing the Daily Record should have been able to push back on that and say, I wouldn't quite be pushing the underdog narrative here. But they don't.
But
They're quite happy to just peddle it.
you know the succulent lamb story. It goes all the way back.
Yes.
They don't bite the hand that feeds. I'll get to your tweet in a second. The Kevin McKenna tweet, which we will not be discussing, but I want to read it out in case you've not had the misfortune to have a chuckle at it. And Kevin McKenna he's a prominent journalist. Pronouns he, Tim, as opposed to he, him. Celtic have had three managerial changes, four first choice players injured long term, and no striker to speak of. Get the begging bowl, Oliver. That we're still within touching distance of the top of the league is astonishing. Yeah, our heart bleeds for Celtic and for you, Kevin. That's enough about that. Here's your tweet, and this is what we will be discussing. And I know there'll be positivity today, there'll be negativity as well, because yes, we're cheerleaders, but we're not blinkered cheerleaders. And the main talking point, I think, from the weekend at Ibrox was the halftime changes that Derek McInnes made to both personnel and to the shape of the side, the formation. And you tweeted a couple of days ago, the halftime changes will be good to cover on the next Around the Funnel pod. We had a bit more control for the next 10 minutes after halftime, but defensively looked ragged with Milne and Findlay looking a bit lost. Suter would probably have been happy to see Braga getting pulled out wide as well. Of course, I mean, our biggest threat was moved from where our biggest threat was our biggest threat. So there's plenty to talk about. What we're also going to do in this episode, I read a really interesting piece on Hearts Standard. They're all very good, the articles that Joel Craig, Blair, and Stephen McGowan and everyone else who writes for Hearts Standard, but it was the analysis piece from Joel. So what we're going to do, something a little bit different. We're going to go through that analysis piece bit by bit, and we're going to analyze the analysis. What we think about what Joel thinks, and what we think about what we think as well, about what happened on Sunday. Try and get to the bottom of it. But as I said last week, and I've said before in the past few weeks on Around the Funnel, if we win the games that we're favourites to win, we'll be there or thereabouts. We weren't favourites at the weekend. Yes, we twice led. Yes, it was frustrating. Yes, we will discuss why it didn't work in the second half. We might have had more of the ball, but we did very little with it. That's all still to come, but I'm looking forward to analysing the analysis later on in this week's pod. Plus, of course, we will look ahead to a massive game. It's the first of 6 massive games before the split. It's this weekend. It's Falkirk at Tynecastle. And I think, as we've spoken about before on the pod, about chapters this season, I think we've reached the end of another chapter. I think this is the start of a new chapter. We've had all those difficult games. We've had Celtic at home. We've had Hibs, which we came through without losing, but we've lost at Ibrox. That's 2 defeats in 3. And out of those 6 halves of football, we've probably only played well in one of them, and that was the first half at Ibrox. But it was too basketball-y. We'll talk about that as well. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forest, Hepburn, and McDonald Signs. Okay, 4-3-3. The team selection from Derek McIntosh with Chesnikov on one side, Kizoridis on the other, Braga through the middle. McIntyre selected at right back, and in the middle, Aju, maybe a bit of a surprise starter ahead of Magnuson, with Mark Leonard playing alongside Benny Beningame. What was your thoughts when you saw the lineup, Scott?
Yeah, so it looked like a sort of make up of a 4-2-3-1, which I think I'd mentioned on here was how I sort of quite fancied us going. I did have Magnuson playing the more advanced role, but I know his wife gave birth on the Friday at some stage, so I don't know if they've looked at that aspect of what maybe been doing in terms of sleep prep, sort of in the couple of days prior to the game, and maybe felt that they'd go with Azu instead of him. So that was a little bit of a surprise. The rest of the team wasn't a huge surprise. I think I'd given a personal preference on Chesnikov not starting, but it wasn't really a huge surprise to see him start the match. So yeah, I think in terms of the shape and the intent, it was probably what I wanted to see. And I know it's going to be a continuing conversation, I think, right up until the end of the season regarding the right back slot. I still think McAtee was probably the best option to start the match with.
I agree, and it lasted 12 minutes. And we don't know what it would have been like if he'd stayed on the pitch, but I think that was a big blow to what Derek McIntosh had worked on. I saw a couple of the times the ball was played to him. You've got a midfielder very comfortable on the ball, playing it right back. So able to bomb forward or get forward, certainly not bomb forward at all times, but someone who's comfortable. You could give him the ball and he's good at doing that. Things changed when he went off, didn't they?
Yeah, and again, one of the other options he gives you if you want to push him a bit further on when the goalie's got the ball or for a goal kick is that he's more likely to win those aerial duels than some of our other players playing in that position. So yeah, he's a loss for a number of reasons, and again, even just looking at it from a continuity standpoint, he's been in that position more than anyone else this season. So again, it probably gives the likes of Halkett and that a little bit more of a feel good, a confident sort of mood going into the game as well because they know each other's game after playing alongside each other a little bit more.
This area here of the podcast, I don't want to go too in depth into certain things because we will be analysing the analysis shortly. So I'll kind of do bullet points. Mark Leonard scores a good goal, good assist from Claudio Braga in 16 minutes. To those that aren't convinced that Benny and Leonard can't play together, what did you see in this game that would suggest that that is true or that isn't true?
Well, Leonard seemed to be playing a bit more of a man-to-man sort of marking job. in the first half, which meant that he was up the park a little bit more. That sort of allows him to nick in and get that ball for the opener. I have said before that I think Leonard and Benny, I think there certainly is an aspect of their game that doesn't quite work as well as a two, as it would with Cammy and Benny, because I just think they're a little bit more dynamic and maybe get themselves about the park just a little bit more than Mark Leonard tends to do, although he's still combative and he can get stuck in. I don't think that's I don't think that's the high point of his game. Uh, I think if you look at the six fixtures that are upcoming, though, I do think that Leonard's got an opportunity to show what he can bring to this Hearts team, and I'm interested to see how that
Mm.
midfield dynamic works over the next few weeks. I think there's an opportunity there to let Benny be the sole deep lying midfielder and maybe actually play a couple of eights in front of him. If you want to stick with a sort of 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, you could actually have Magnuson and Leonard, or maybe as you coming in and maybe playing with a couple of eights, even somebody like Blair Spittle, perhaps playing in an advanced sort of midfield role. So that's going to be interesting to see now that we've got a few options in that area of the park. So yeah, I thought he'd done really well. I think second half against Celtic and probably the whole game on Sunday has probably been Mark Leonard's best moments in a Hearts jersey. I felt that after Claudio Braga, he was probably our next best player in a Maroon jersey. So hopefully he can continue that form. And like I say, I think we'll have a bit more time on the ball over the next few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do.
The two key players that Hearts have been without for the past month, 6 weeks, Cammy Devlin and Lawrence Shankland. And we wondered, could we replace both of them? We've not been able to replace both of them. I think we've done well to replace Cammy Devlin with Mark Leonard. I think where we've really felt it is Lawrence Shankland missing. And hopefully he'll be available for maybe the last 10 games of the season. What have we got? We've got 6 plus 5. Nah, that's probably pushing it. Maybe he'll be available for the last few before the split and then after the split. So that's still to look forward to. Yes, we're playing Claudio Braga through the middle, and you've said it, and a few Hearts fans have said it. That's his best position. But for me, the most annoying things from the weekend, apart from the halftime changes, which we'll get on to, the McIntosh injury, which there's nothing we could do about. But one thing we could have done better with, the two times we led, we didn't keep that lead for double-digit minutes. 3 minutes and then 9 minutes. And Ibrox had a brilliant atmosphere at kickoff, and obviously for Rangers fans after they nudged ahead. But in that 3 minute period, there was a frustration before they equalised. That would be the one thing that I would say, above all else, that if we'd kept the lead longer on both occasions, if we'd seen it to halftime 2-1 up, if we'd got a long way into the game before we conceded the first equaliser, that might have made a difference. So, what's your take on the goals that we conceded and how preventable they were?
I think the first three are definitely preventable. They're preventable, first of all, from the fact that we have very simple passes at our disposal in those three situations. I think back to particularly the first and third goals. I think the first goal, there's actually the potential there for us to break out, if not in a 2-on-2 situation, but a 3-against-2 situation, where if Aju turns and takes the ball, then he knows that Chesnikov's out wide right is a good option. He then plays it back to Benny, but then Benny has that option as well and doesn't take it as well. So we miss out on two opportunities there to get the ball out to Chesnikov, who was in a lot of space. The third goal as well, I believe it was Beningame that misplaces a pass out to Braga. Braga's sort of just hogging the touchline, and it was a pretty simple ball. And Benny doesn't manage it, and then Rangers sort of get up the park and score there as well. So that's really disappointing that there'll be aspects of Rangers goals that they'll like. I think the third goal especially, it's a good cross, and Chermiti does really well in terms of the lead he gets, in terms of scoring that header. But I think from a Hearts point of view, you'll look at those goals and you'll think, there's a lot that could have been done, not just defensively, but just in terms of possession. And I don't know don't know if that has an impact on the mindset at half time in terms of the changes. But I don't think the shape of the team was what was causing those issues. I think that was just individual errors.
I think we should analyze the analysis now because if we keep going like this, there'll be things that we're repeating, and I don't want to do that. I was just trying to give you the bullet points from the game. It was frustrating to be in the game, very much so, but whether or not it was a trust issue for certain players, the way that they were set up, and bearing in mind that'll have been worked on most of the week, albeit McIntosh after 12 minutes, that changed with Steinwender coming on. But what I'm going to do here, this is an article from Hearts Standard written by Joel Sked. And I'm going to go through it. I'm going to miss out the quotes from Derek McIntosh because we've already heard about them. But this is Joel's analysis piece. He's kind of split it up into team selection, first half encouragement and concerns, second half changes, and conclusion. So we'll go through this. This is behind the paywall, but we're giving it to you for free, you lucky people. So let's read what it is and then we can dissect and give our thoughts about the analysis of Sunday at Ibrox. Heart of Midlothian knew, no matter the outcome on Sunday, they would continue to lead at the top of the Scottish Premiership, such is the position that they have put themselves in this season, topping the table since November. Defeated Ibrox, going down 4-2 to Rangers, simply meant the margin for error at the top and over the next 11 games is reduced. It remains a position that everyone associated with the club would have bitten several hands off for at the start of the season and the first few months of the campaign. There were positive moments and elements of the performance. However, the overriding feeling may well be frustration. Okay, team selection. Can maybe glide over this and gloss over this a little bit because we've already spoken. Derek McIntosh making the two changes. Halkett replacing Kent. Ajew coming in for Kabori, starting his first game for the club since his move in August. Hearts head coach spoke of wanting an extra midfielder with Ajew playing in front of Benny and Mark Leonard, supporting Claudio Braga. Okay, first point about this. Should it have been Magnuson or should it have been Ajew in the position that Ajew ultimately played?
I think it probably should have been Magnuson, but again, I just don't know if the events in that 48-hour period prior to the game has forced Derek McIntosh into making a change. Because Magnuson would seem to be the obvious choice. He played an advanced midfield role at Parkhead earlier on in the season, and he's came on to good effect and done something similar. So it would be rather strange if we've taken the decision to go with Ajew ahead Magnuson, even although Ajew is the one with the bigger profile and he's the one that the fans want to see. I think, something that we've touched on before, and I know Ryan's talked about quite a lot about the impact of not playing football can have on players in terms of how quickly they can come back and, get into the general feel of a game and sort of make a positive contribution. I'm glad Ajew's had some minutes because I think the only way you can get match fit is to play football, ultimately. You can train all you want, but ultimately to get match fit, you need to be on the pitch and you need to be getting minutes. So I'm glad he's even managed to get a half for that if it means that he can contribute over the coming weeks and months. But yeah, for me, I would have preferred to have seen Magnuson in there. Again, it's another option at set plays as well, so it would have gave us a bit more strength in those situations.
Yeah, the reasoning behind Magnuson not starting and Ajew starting, according to Derek McIntosh, had nothing to do with the fact that his partner had given birth. He said he felt that he was a more technical option, Ajew, in there than Magnuson. And he said that Braga playing as the kind of nine who likes to come towards the ball, that Ajew can maybe go beyond. And at times I thought we showed evidence of that, but maybe not quite enough. So that's part one of the analysis from the Hearts Standards Joel Sked. Part two, first half encouragement and concerns. First half at Ibrox was as entertaining a 45 minutes as there's been so far this season in the Scottish Premiership, whether you were looking at it from an action point of view or a tactical point of view. At times it resembled the final stages of a cup tie, with both teams keen to avoid extra time. Hearts have gone toe-to-toe with Rangers and Celtic this season. There hasn't been a case of sitting back, soaking up pressure and trying to eke out a result. It's been as much about causing trouble as it has been about containment, and that was seen as early as the third minute when Hearts lost the ball in the Rangers half. The first thought was win it back rather than retreat. Beningame and Leonard swarmed Nico Raskin, and when he squeezed a pass through, Chermiti was immediately pressed in his own half by Craig Halkett. So let's look bigger picture here. How many times have we spoken over the years on this podcast, and how many times have Hearts fans spoken in pubs and clubs and online about games against Rangers or Celtic at Ibrox or Celtic Park and just dreading them? I didn't have any fear going through. That's a big step forward. And the way that we started this game, I kind of believe we belong. And don't be sit and be timid and have your tummies tickled. Try and take the game to Rangers within reason. The start kind of showed that we went there with a team selection and formation selection to be brave. And that fear factor, for me, no longer exists when going to Rangers and Celtic.
Yeah, I would agree. And look, there's always an argument to be made by people in hindsight that because of how Rangers have struggled against the low block this season, that it could have been quite easy to have maybe sat in and maybe been a bit more reserved. But I don't think that would have suited us. I think we've been good in these types of cup tie scenarios where it's been a bit back and forth between teams, and we've tended to get the marginal gains. Again, we've not won a lot of games of football this year by 2 or 3 goals, but I think when games have been on a sort of fine edge, I think we've tended to come out winners more often than not, and that's how this game seemed to be going. Although I was disappointed with the nature of the 2 goals we'd lost in the first half, we got to half time thinking if we repeat that again in the second half, I still think we can come out on top here because there were still opportunities to be had for us. I felt that Claudio Braga was playing so well. It was just a typical Braga performance in terms of him being just so industrious. But he was really good. He was on the front foot. He caught Suter off guard on a number of occasions. Suter looked really uncomfortable, and it just seemed that if we stuck like that and either had a bit more luck or were a bit more, made the better individual decisions in the second half, that we could still get a positive result out of that game.
A few minutes later, Rangers broke Hearts' press and, for a split second, had a 4 versus 3. Halkett wins the ball on the halfway line, a crucial intervention and another demonstration of Hearts' brave approach. There was the bravery. There was also the let's not worry about consequences. And at times, if you have to go man for man to give you an extra man in another area of the field, then fine. And I like that about Hearts in this first half. And Joel goes on to say that was a key reason behind the opening goal as Hearts capitalised on poor play from the home side. Leonard was pushed high out of possession and he was switched on to latch onto Emmanuel Fernandez's loose pass and Raskin's lack of awareness. It earned him a first goal for Hearts in the first team since 2017. Sorry, a first goal for the Hearts first team and a first goal for Hearts in scoring in a reserve game in 2017 against Partick Thistle. Leonard's positioning was perhaps the most interesting, certainly out of possession. He almost made it look like a front three as he often tracked Chukwani. The Hearts wide men were tasked with following the Rangers fullbacks and the Hearts fullbacks on the 2 Rangers wide men. While we're talking about this Hearts Rangers game at Ibrox on Sunday, I think, and it's not a case of stumbling on a formation, I think that first half, whereas Derek McIntosh said it was basketball-y, I think that's the kind of thing we're going to have to do now, between now and the split, if we need to get the 6 wins that are required to certainly put us ahead, hopefully. But the way that we played in that first half, is that something that you can see across the board now that Derek McIntosh would attempt in these 6 games, whether it's the 4 at home or whether it's the trips to Killie or Livingston? Or do you still think there's an element, and we'll go on to the second half and his chopping and changing at half time about, oh shit, that was too, kind of a little bit too gung-ho and a little bit too brave. Did we find ourselves a formation and a game plan and a bravery in that first half that we shall need in those 6 games before the split?
So I think, firstly, this is where this particular squad needs to evolve to. So I didn't think it would happen. Certainly not at Ibrox anyway. But in terms of the personnel involved, in terms of having Chesnikov and Kizididis on the wings and having a Jew playing as a proper advanced midfielder, that is where this squad was built to move towards. Everything we've seen up to this point has been Derek McInnes reacting to either not being able to get the players in that we needed, maybe in August with regards to the right back situation, then try to work around some of the injuries that we've had. So you've had the likes of Harry Milne sometimes playing out wide right because we couldn't get Chesnikov in till January. But I do think eventually the squad was going to evolve to this 4-2-3-1. Now, I can't answer just now whether that's what's going to happen under Derek McInnes, because I'm still of the opinion that Derek McInnes is a 1 to 2 year transitional manager for the club in terms of how we're operating and where we're going to go. And that's whether we win the league this season or not. I just think that's his journey. I think if the way he is set up this year, I think he'll be the next Scotland manager. I'd be very surprised if he's not. I just don't know when that will be, whether it'll be within the next 12 months or the next 24 to 36 months. But I do think McInnes will be here for a year or two. What he decides to do then, I don't know. But for me, in terms of the players that we've brought in and the types of players that we can identify over the next couple of transfer windows, a 4-2-3-1 would suit them. I think that I felt for Chesnikov because he obviously had a job to do in terms of making sure that he was tracking back with the fullback. And I actually think over the last couple of games, he's shown that he's got the mentality to play in Scotland. I think the disappointing thing is that he's not had too many opportunities to show what he can do in terms of going forward. But I think that opportunity will come round over the next few weeks. So I don't see any reason to change the system because we're now moving away from that set of fixtures, which involved 2 games against the Old Firm and a derby and an away trip to St Mirren. I would quite like to see us stick with this, given that we've got the likes of Aju and Chesnikov coming into the team, and because we don't have Shanklin there as well. I think when you don't have Shanklin dropping into that 10 and being able to link the game, I think it's important that you find a midfielder that can maybe play that position and help the rest of the team link play from there. So I think whether it's Aju or Magnuson, I think it'd be a good idea to go with somebody like that pushing forward, at least until Shanklin comes back in. Then you could maybe potentially switch to a 4-2-4, and you've got Shanklin maybe just dropping a little bit deeper than the main focal point up front.
Time will tell if Derek McInnes has the adaptability to not just get Hearts to the top of the table, but to keep Hearts at the top of the table by potentially playing a different style. It's one thing being chased, but Hearts might end up in a situation where they're chasing, and then you've got nothing to lose. But while you're being chased, you can understand why there is this kind of, well, let's just be a little bit more pragmatic. Whereas I thought the bravery in the first half is something that will need to be replicated. And if it can be replicated and playing on the front foot with 3 attackers and a 10, then I think that gives us the best chance of getting the points that we need between now and the split. Back to Joel's analysis. On a couple of occasions, Rangers zipped passes into the middle of the park where their wide men were goal side of the Hearts midfield. That's perhaps what concerned McInnes the most regarding the half-time change. Perhaps the most frustrating thing for McInnes was the fact that both of Rangers' first half goals came from positive attacking situations that Hearts failed to take advantage of. The key moment in the game, in this writer's opinion, Joel Sked, came in the 18th minute. The Ibrox support was beginning to turn on their players. The noise before and at the start of the game was loud. Some of those who cover Rangers remarked it was similar to an Old Firm game. But Hearts, having taken the lead in the manner they had, were set to turn the screw. Another Rangers attack had broken down. Hearts had 2 chances to find Chesnikov scampering down the right-hand side. Doing so would have had a 2v2 situation going into the Rangers half. But Aju made the mistake of not playing forward when he had the chance, going back to Beningame rather than turning and playing the pass that looked on. When it went to Meningame, he could have clipped a pass to Chesnikov, running down the right. He went to Aju. And if it had been spot on, the Brazilian could have turned and made it a 3v2. That wasn't the only moment. Prior to the opening goal, Aju tried to play into Braga, who was being marked rather than opening up to Chesnikov. That's very in depth. That is not the type of analysis to that extent, to that minutiae that Hearts would normally have at this time of the year. But this is different. We're going for a league title. We're not trying to get out of trouble like we were last season or the season before. We're not trying to get as close to this team in second as possible. Every single decision that we make has to be right. And that's difficult. That's very, very hard. These little things, those little things that Joe was talking about, whether it's Benny or whether it's Aju trying to play that pass. How easy do you think it is to learn this week in training from those little things that we should maybe have done, but we didn't, to ensure that if the same situation comes up against Falkirk, that we do the right thing and we don't concede at the other end because we've done the wrong thing?
I think a lot of that comes down to the individual rather than the manager and what he can work on during the week. Because I think in terms of the structure of what the manager's wanting from that formation, that's in place. That's why we're in that potential breakaway situation because of what we've been working on during the week. The issues with the decision making of the players and both Beningame and Azure are experienced enough to be able to make better decisions in that moment. I think with Azure, again, what could be going against him is he's lacking match time. So that's where you could possibly give him a concession there. But I think Benny especially has the ability to play a simple clip ball out to the right like that. So that's where it's disappointing. But again, that it's those sorts of moments which make me frustrated at what we decide to do at half time. And I think we'll get there in terms of what we're going to cover in terms of Joel's piece. But yeah, I felt that there was the opportunity there to get those situations. Even although Rangers had caused us problems and we'd caused ourselves problems in the first half, I felt that being in a cup tie and being in a sort of basketball situation wasn't actually that bad a situation for us. I would have been happy to have seen that continue.
The second Rangers goal, this is back to Joel's analysis, started with Hearts in possession and four advancing in and around the home side's box. 18 seconds later, it was in the back of the net at the other end. When you go to Ibrox and Celtic Park, there's a need for your goalkeeper to make big saves. That wasn't the case for Hearts, with Swallow not looking particularly strong for the first two goals. Do we have a goalkeeping situation in that put the two of them together and you'd have a top class goalkeeper with the shot stopping of Craig Gordon and the kicking of Swallow? But the German just seemed out of sorts in this game. Is it one of those things? Or should we be looking a little bit deeper and maybe contemplating a change that Derek McIntosh suggested prior to the Celtic game, that both goalkeepers would be used, even although they were out the cup between now and the end of the season?
So I still think that Schwalov has a better control of his box just now. Uh, Now, on to the goals that we lose. I think of the four goals, the one that I think Craig saves is the second one. I think Schwallow doesn't do a good enough job of getting his angles right at his front post. I feel like that's something you'd expect your keeper to save because it's a decent shot. It's not like it's hit with any sort of great power. Normally, when you see keepers beaten from the front post, if it's a good goal, it tends to be just because of the ferocity of the shot. But I wouldn't class that in that category. So I think that's one where I think Schwallow should be probably most disappointed in terms of the four goals that we lose. I wouldn't be looking to make a change with the goalkeeper situation just because I don't think there's a I don't think there's a clear and obvious difference between the two in terms of making up for each other's deficiencies. But just don't see the point in doing that. And again, I haven't seen us play the ball out from the back through the middle well enough to be able to say to Craig, well, it's fine to put Craig in goals because he can just play the ball short to the full backs or the centre backs and let them play for the back. I think the way McIntosh has set us up this season is to contest second balls. Don't know if that's going to change between now and the end of the season, so that would be a point of concern. I think you saw that primarily in that first half against Celtic a few weeks ago. The amount of situations we found ourselves in because we couldn't even contest the initial aerial ball because Craig was struggling with the ball getting put back to his feet. So, yeah, I would stick with what we've got just now, even although I think you've got to concede that Craig probably saves that second shot. And Swallow should be saving that second shot 9 times out of 10 as well. So, yeah, that's probably not. Saturday's one of those weird games. We get beat 4-2. We're poor at times at the back, but I think there's changes that are made at half time and that don't help the defender situation. Obviously, the McAtee injury as well. I think for me, moving into next week, I probably only really want to see one change, or maybe two at the most, to the starting 11. So I don't think there's a lot that I want to see change just now because I felt we were brave, and I think if we go into future matches with that bravery and just a little bit more controlled decision making in the attacking areas, I think we'll hurt teams.
One of the big talking points in this game was the change of shape and change of personnel by Hearts at half time. We will discuss that next on Scarves Around the Funnel, brought to you by Forrest, Hepburn, and McDonald Signs. Okay, the penultimate topic in Joel's analysis is simply entitled Second Half Changes. When Hearts emerged from the break, McIntosh had made two changes. Ajew and Chesnikov had been replaced by Kabori and Jordi Altona with a switch to 3-4-3. Here's what Derek McIntosh had to say about this. Because it was two each and the game was a wee bit basketball-y for me, we just looked for that extra body at the back. We needed to take the sting out of the game, the way Rangers finished the first half. And I thought by and large that we did. I thought we needed a wee bit more of a focal point at times just to play beyond Rangers' press. Obviously, they come out with the two big strikers, and we actually anticipated they might do that and maybe go 4-4-2. They can hit their strikers a bit quicker and it paid dividends for them at times. But we anticipated that. But it wasn't just those moments. It wasn't direct play up to the strikers that caused the problems. It was our own transitions. And we just thought that by keeping Kessie and Braga tucked in close to Kabori, who came on, I thought that we started the second half really well with some good movements, and I thought we'd seen the benefit of a focal point on Kabori, but the third goal is a disappointing goal to lose. So here's when you can look at this glass half empty or glass half full. The manager wants to look at it up until the concession of the goal, glass half full, because he sees his side gain more control of the football game. But those looking at it from a glass half empty perspective don't see why a change was necessary or that particular change. Because I've seen people saying, well, why didn't you just do Magnuson for Ajew and play him a little bit deeper? So the glass half empty brigade would look at that and basically say, look, that wasn't required because yes, you had more control of the game, but that was at the expense of not having anywhere near as much of a threat in the final third. What side of the fence are you on here?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, this is one of those decisions where I don't really want to talk about it in sort of black and white terms regarding being right and being wrong, because ultimately we're fans, and that's a manager that's got us to the top of the league through the bulk of his decision making. So I think the rationale is sound enough from Derek McIntosh. I just think for me, there's an instinct or a preference from me to see us continue into that risk and reward strategy that we saw in the first half. I think the instincts of the manager were the opposite of that, and I think he wanted to see more control. And that's possibly because he knew that out of the two teams, we were the ones who could walk away from that game at 2-2 and be the happier of the two. And I think that's where his instincts have potentially failed him on this occasion. But again, look, he's right in pointing out that for that 10-15 minute spell, we did gain more territory and we had more of the ball. What disappoints me though is that you only have to go back a few days to the Hibs game to see that there was a similar sort of reaction made, not in terms of bringing on subs, but the system changed. We changed to a sort of 3-4-3, 3-5-2 against Hibs at half time. And I felt that there was a similar pattern that emerged in that game where for 10 minutes or so, we saw more of the game in Hibs' half. We were winning more second balls in their half, getting a few corner kicks. But then Hibs then tweaked it. And I felt from that moment on, from about the 60th minute to about the 80th minute, Hibs had a 20-minute spell where Cadden, especially down the left, was getting so much joy behind Chesnikov. So in that space between Chesnikov and McAtee, I felt like Hibs were getting a lot of joy in that area, and that's where they were getting most of their sort of half chances and getting a bit more momentum in the game. And I just felt like the same thing happened on Saturday, albeit it seemed to happen down our left side rather than our right side this time. I thought that Milne and Finlay looked very uncomfortable with the change. And again, this goes back to there's a there's a long debate that we can all have about, shouldn't it be easy for a fullback to play as a wing back and vice versa? And I just don't think it is that easy. I think some fullbacks, and Andrew Robertson's a good example of this. I watch
Yes.
Andrew Robertson as a wing back, and he's a horrendous wing back. He doesn't have the awareness of what's going on behind him to play as a wing back. And I think Harry Milne's a little bit similar in that vein. I think sometimes you get left backs who are better when they've got the whole game in front of them. And I think Harry Milne is an example of that. And I felt moving him up not only seemed to have a detrimental impact on him, he still tried, as he always does, to be an attacking outlet. But I felt that him and Finlay really struggled in that second half because of that. But like I said at the start, I think the rationale for McIntosh is sound enough. And I'm not telling him he's wrong. It's just that as a personal preference of what I was seeing in the first half and what I've enjoyed seeing from Hearts this season, I would have been quite content to have seen us continue with that going into the second half, even if it meant us not having much of the ball. I still felt that, I think one of the biggest impacts of the system change was to bring Kabori on and we pull Braga out wide.
Mhm.
And I just think that really does negate the threat that we have. And that's it's not a slight on Kabori. I think when we did eventually get the ball out to Kabori, he was able to hold the ball up on a couple of occasions. But look, Claudio Braga is one of the most industrious centre forwards that I've seen watching Hearts throughout my whole life. And I think it's a very hard act to follow for anyone. And Kabori's just not that type of forward. He's just a different style of forward. I think Kabori needs to be, running towards goal rather than having his back to it. I think he needs to be in the penalty box, feeding off the cross balls. And I've talked about this before, with the way that we're set up just now with our inverted wingers, I don't think it brings out the best in Kabori. So I did sort of feel for him to an extent, and I just felt that it wasn't just the system change, it was the fact that we also sort of brought Kabori in. We took Braga away from a situation where he was causing havoc. And yeah, we just never really, although we had stages where we were in possession and maybe in control, even after Rangers went 3-2 up, we never really looked that threatening in those situations. So that's probably where I think a lot of fans are frustrated, because I feel like that's a mistake that we've, not a mistake, that's a choice we've made now 2 games running. It didn't impact us in the end against Hibs, but it did on Saturday. So I think come Saturday against Falkirk, I'd quite like to see us stick with the 4 at the back, because I think that's where our back 4 are at their most comfortable.
I think there should be two non-negotiables between now and when Lawrence Shankland returns. One, that Claudio Braga plays as a number 9. End of. Doesn't get put wide. He plays as a number 9. The number of Rangers fans and fans of other clubs that watched the game at the weekend that spoke about how good Claudio Braga was in that first half in that centre forward position. There's the respect from not just Hearts fans, but from the wider community in Scottish football. That's his position right now. And until Lawrence Shankland comes back, that should be a non-negotiable. The other one is Harry Milne at left back in a 4, because that's how you get your best. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember when Gary Mackay was a guest on Scarves Around the Funnel a few months ago, and he was speaking about that wing back role. And it's interesting because Craig Burley, a colleague of mine at ESPN, spoke about it because he got asked to play about it for Scotland And it's basically two positions in one, and you're spot on about that. Because you're a brilliant fullback or a brilliant left midfielder or right midfielder, it doesn't mean to say that you can play as a wing back and then just take to it like a duck to water. It's a specialized position. And teams that only play three at the back will sign wing backs that only play as wing backs or wide of midfield. So Milne, I understand why you think it might work, but for me, that's your other non-negotiable. Harry Milne is your left back, plays as a left back in a four, and Claudio Braga plays as a nine, either with or without a partner through the middle. Now, going back to Joel's piece, this is where I think he has let Derek McIntosh off lightly. And I'm going to disagree. I'm going to explain why I disagree after I read you the rest of this analysis from the penultimate part of Joel's piece. Rewatching the first half provided a greater understanding of McIntosh's thinking. As mentioned, Skov Olsen and Moore were threatening and causing issues with their positioning. The move to a back three helped thwart that general threat from open play, cutting the supply line and space to Skov Olsen and Moore getting between the lines with the ball. When Rangers had it, it was often in front of Hearts, and the threat on the transition was nullified. The game went from being basketball-y to the visitors having more control. Hearts went from having a 34% share of possession with 143 passes and a 74% accuracy in the first half to 54%, which is 20% better, possession with 199 passes, which is 56 passes more in the second half, and an accuracy of 81%, which is 7% more. This is when you get into the, oh, stats can kind of tell you whatever they want you to tell you. I'm a commentator. I can make a narrative any way I want by getting the stats that I have to suit the way that I want the narrative to be. Here's what I think about that, and I totally understand that, but that was at the detriment of Hearts as an attacking force, basically. Moving Claudio Braga out wide totally nullified that. I think the happiest two people were going to be the two centre halves for Rangers when Braga moves wide. Scott, you used the phrase risk and reward. For me, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward right now. And concerning ourselves too much with consequences, worrying too much about the opposition. That's not what title contenders do. You think Celtic are doing that when they're 2 goals down? Do you think Rangers are doing that as well when they're in trouble, but they find a way? This for us, A, is about finding a way, but B, it's about being brave. And if we'd had six halves in the last three games, and I'm struggling to find any positives, then we've got a big issue. But we found a way against Hibs when we didn't play well. St Mirren wasn't great, but we were down to 10, but it was one of those performances. But Rangers first half compared to Rangers second half, this is the big issue for me. This is Derek McIntosh deciding, you know what, let's be more cautious. Let's try and hit them in a different way, maybe more on the counter, by controlling the ball more and giving us more of a say in what happens in the game. Yeah, but the goal that we conceded wasn't great, the third one. And that is a big issue. As Joel says, another big moment in the game. The key third goal came about via decision-making error. Stuart Finlay, the left-sided centre-back in a three, came across and tracked Skov Olsen well. When the ball went back, naturally, he wanted to return to a position within the box, which meant he left the Danish international in acres of space. We didn't, I'm sure, work too much on a back three during the week, and now we're having to play as a back three. This, for me, is a manager who's done really well to get Hearts to the top of the table. But I'm not convinced that he, right now, with the way he goes about things, Scott, is the manager that necessarily can give us the best chance to keep us at the top of the table, because there's always that pragmatism that comes in. Yeah, but what if? If we can be brave in that first half for the rest of the games before the top six split, I think that gives us the best chance. I'm just not convinced the manager will see it like that and will be overly cautious. And I think we might be sitting at the end of the season going, fuck, what a chance we had. That risk and reward, but he elected to take the other option. Is that a concern for you?
I can understand that. I think one of the best ways of describing where we're at just now is that Derek McInnes, through his instincts and knowledge of Scottish football, is why we've got to this
Agreed.
stage.
Agreed.
It could
But
also be
getting there
argued
is
that,
different from staying there.
yeah, I was just going to say that it could also be those same instincts that could see us
Yep.
then eventually lose that. So it's interesting. I suppose to be fair to Derek McInnes, though, the pragmatism or perceived pragmatism happens halfway through a game. So he's been brave at the start. So I think there's evidence there and throughout the season to suggest that he's capable of doing it. He's talked about, I think if he'd had Chesnikov in earlier on in the season, I think you would have seen us play with two wide men earlier. I know some fans feel that he doesn't want to do it, but I think that's been more a lack of trust in Kerjota being that option for us. But I think as soon as you've seen Chesnikov come through the door, there's a willingness now to go ahead with that. So I do think there's evidence there to suggest that we will be more brave or stick with what we've done in the first half moving forward. I don't know whether just in that initial 15-minute break at half time, his instinct, which has sometimes been aimed at him as a manager, maybe just kicked in a little bit in terms of being at 2-2 and maybe thinking, well, we're not the ones that need to chase this here and turn it into a basketball game. We can play it in a bit more controlled fashion. And again, from that viewpoint, we did have more control, but control doesn't necessarily lead to more threat. And we've moaned and we've sort of bumped our gums in the past about previous Hearts managers who have came out in post-match interviews and used that term control. I fucking hate it. I hate it when we use it because it can cover a multitude of sins in the attacking front. And I felt like Sunday was one of those examples of that where, yes, we might have had a bit more control, but ultimately it left us in a situation where we went 3-2 behind where we never really garnered any momentum because of not just the shape change, but pulling Braga out wide. I think Alcena struggled in that wing back role as well. So we had two wing backs that didn't look very comfortable, a back three that didn't look overly comfortable. And then you had Braga in a pretty ineffective position. You had Kabori playing with his back to goal, which I don't think gets the best out of him. So we kind of were really struggling from that point. I think the changes we made at half time, I think were with the intent of getting out there with a 2-2. I don't see where the goals were going to come from as soon as we make those changes. So I think at best we're coming away with a 2-2, and that's why I think I don't want to talk about it in terms of right and wrong. It's just more an instinctive thing for the manager, which I think he maybe needs to learn from a little bit and maybe have a bit more trust in the players to just say, right, we go for it again. And if they score, we're in a position where we can get another couple of goals. Because there's one thing you can say about Hearts this season, we're clinical. We don't need to create a lot of chances to score goals. We had 3 shots on target in that first half, and we took 2 of them. So, yeah, I think I'd like to see a bit more of that, given the run of fixtures we've got over the next 6 games. I'm confident we'll do it, though. I think McInnes has since he's came in, I think he's had a good gauge of what fans want from a Hearts team. And by and large, I think he's met that expectation more often than not. And I think first half at Ibrox was another example of that. You know, we've seen a lot of Hearts teams turn up at Ibrox and be beaten before the first whistle blows. That wasn't the case on Saturday. I think our decision making and our poor decisions was what ultimately led to our failure on Saturday. So I've got no concerns about that on the whole, but I do understand if there is that observation or concern coming in from some supporters. But I think that could chiefly be down to the perception a lot of us had of McInnes prior to coming in as Hearts manager. So we're maybe starting to think back to his final days at Aberdeen and large spells at Kilmarnock where he was chiefly known as a pragmatic coach. Where if you look at the body of work at Hearts, I don't think that's probably a fair observation, even although he maybe went back to those instincts at half time on Sunday.
Before we get Joel's conclusion, let me sum up what I think. If we get Derek McInnes's first half approach, which I loved at Ibrox, loved it. It's just like, you know what? The fear, fuck it. Let's take the game to them. Brave, get it forward, take risks, not daft risks, but ones where you might have a couple of players on you, but you still believe you can get the ball forward. If we get that between now and the split, brilliant. That's the Derek McInnes I want to see. I'm not having a go at the manager. I'm having a go at the manager's approach in the second half. That will not win us the league. That kind of, oh, well, I'm happy with this, I'll stick with this, and whatever. We are getting a forensic look at this game against Rangers. We're getting into all the nooks and crannies because you have to. When you're challenging for a league title, all the little bits, what can we do better? No doubt that's what the manager will look at this season on a whole. But for this week, going into the Falkirk game, I want to see him be more like the Derek McInnes in the first half than the Derek McInnes in the second half. And if we do, and if we're brave, I think that gives us the best chance possible between now and the split to go into that split either leading or tied on points. Because if Celtic win all their games and we win all our games before the split, then we'll be level with them. But let's just focus on Falkirk first. Before that, let's get Joel's conclusion to his article. Losing any game of football is disappointing, even more so when it's a top of the table clash in the most exciting title battle this century in the Scottish Premiership. However, frustration is perhaps a stronger feeling than disappointment. The frustration of going ahead twice but not capitalising on turning the Ibrox crowd, the frustration of not making the most of positive moments on the counter in the first half, the frustration of not posing enough of a threat in the second half, the frustration of giving up cheap goals. It was the first time this season Hearts had lost by more than a goal. But that was down to the game state. Totally agree with that. We're chasing. Yeah, we weren't great. They've gone up and scored. But look, it's a goal down and we need to try and get back. Agree with that. There were positives to take from the encounter and going to Ibrox for a mammoth match, which had an atmosphere to match. And this is important. The team was not overawed. The result should not alter the belief and confidence of the Hearts support in what this team can achieve. And McInnes was right to be bullish when he spoke to the press afterwards. Even with 2 defeats in the space of 3 games, Hearts remain top of the Scottish Premiership. The margin for error has been reduced, yes, but the next 6 games present an opportunity to build it back up and go into the split in as strong a position as possible. That's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. We're still in a good place. Still in a position of strength. Hammy should be back in a couple of weeks. Shankland might be a week or two on top of that. I think I think the next couple of home games take care of themselves. I think the situations of our rivals will help with that. Falkirk are scrambling for centre halves. Lewis Nielsen is naturally out because of the loan agreement that we have with Falkirk, but they also have Liam Henderson out for this game as well. So they're going to have to play Cole Donaldson, who hasn't played a lot of football this season. They're also going to have to play Connor Allen, who's played quite a lot at right back this season when he has played. So I think there's an opportunity to catch them due to that situation. And then Aberdeen the following week are a team that are kind of just almost sleepwalking their way to the end of the season. I don't think they're quite in enough trouble to get sucked into the sort of second bottom 11th position in the league, but they're not really going to threaten the top 6 either. So I think you can sort of see a team and an interim manager that's struggling to motivate themselves just now. So I think these next 2 games are an opportunity to win, but also win comprehensively, because I think in terms of narrative and momentum, I don't think it's just about getting the win, although that is the priority. I'd like to see us get the win and win comfortably as well in these next 2 home games, just to set ourselves up for the final 9 games of the season.
You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, brought to you by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Okay, something a little bit different there. Analyzing the analysis. And I think we're all coming at this from pretty much the same place. We're in a brilliant position right now. This isn't a time for having a go at individuals on social media. Some of the stuff I read about Michael Steinvender. I mean, this is a centre back playing at right back. He wouldn't choose to play there, but needs must. According to Derek McInnes, he was a better option than Jordi Altona. Again,
I mean,
that
to
is
be fair though,
that's
from a dark comedy standpoint, somebody's now coined the term Epstein vendor about him, which
oh Jesus.
yeah. So I mean, there's a bit of sort of dark humour involved in that. Even although I wouldn't quite agree with the sentiment, it's still quite funny.
Oof. I'll distance myself from that one. I have nothing to do with that. Falkirk, let's end this by looking ahead to Falkirk at home. I've got my team, and I wonder if it's similar to yours because you touched upon this earlier about making one, maybe two changes. The goalkeeping situation, let's leave that to Derek McIntosh. He sees them on a daily basis. As much as I have a soft spot for the Prince, Craig Gordon, I don't. You can't keep chopping and changing because you need some semblance of continuity here. And Craig will admit himself it wasn't his best game against Celtic, but we can't just have Craig against Falkirk and Alex against Aberdeen. Let's stick with the goalkeeper right now in Alex Swallow, albeit I still think Craig is a better shot stopper. But if we want to get the ball moving quickly and we want, say, the goalkeeper gets it, we want it quickly played out to the right hand side, then I think Swallow's your better option. So here's my team for the weekend. If I'm going with Swallow in goal, I've got Altona and Milne as my fullbacks. I've got Finlay and Halkett as my centre backs. I've got Benny and Leonard and Magnuson as the three in midfield, with a caveat to that. I might have Aju instead of Benny. I've got Chesnikov on the right, I've got Kizaridis on the left, and I've got Braga through the middle. In a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, call it what you want. But I want round pegs and round holes. I want Altona to get forward. If you can't play a guy who's cost €1 million in a home game against Falkirk and subsequently against Aberdeen, what the fuck was the point of signing him? So there's my two. Whether it's Aju or whether it's Benny, I'm starting Magnuson, I'm starting Altona. What are you doing?
Yeah, so that's the exact same 11. They were the only two changes I was thinking about was bringing in Magnuson for Azew and bringing in Altona for McAtee. I agree with Altona. I think these are good games to get him in, bring him up to speed. I think the issues that I have seen him potentially struggle with, I don't foresee happening at home to Falkirk just because they play the game slightly different way to other teams. So they tend to play through the lines, through the midfield. And although they look to get the ball out into the wide areas, it's not long diagonals. It's not those types of situations that I've maybe seen them succumb to in one or two other matches. So I think it'd be a good match to get them integrated into. I'd stick with Magnuson over Azew, although I do want to see Azew getting more minutes. I think Magnuson has shown that he can play that position. I think in terms of getting somebody that can potentially get on top of Brad Spencer, I think Magnuson's a good option for that. And then you've got Azew that can come on second half if need be. But I'm quite confident if we go with something similar to that team, I think we can get a really positive result. Not just that, but a comfortable result as well. Because I think it would be good for the club and the fans if they could start to get a couple of results like that over the next 6 games. Because we all know once it hits the split, games are probably going to be really tight and really nervy, given what's going to be at stake for everyone involved. So I think whatever we can do to try and alleviate the pressure and the tension that can be felt amongst the fans just now would be most grateful.
This book of Hearts season, for me, has two chapters remaining. Up until the split is the penultimate chapter, and then post-split is the final chapter that will decide the outcome, the narrative, the story of the book. Does it have a happy ending? Does it have a sad ending? We can talk at a later date about if Hearts don't win the title. Depends on the narrative of how they didn't win the title, as to whether or not it would be seen as throwing it away or whatever. If Hearts do win the title, where was the key point? Was there one key match? That's all still to come, right? That can be for the follow-up. That can be for the sequel. But right now, for me, there's two chapters remaining. Up until the split, we have 6 cup finals left. That's all we should be worrying about right now. I think we need 5 wins and 1 draw as a minimum to keep us top of the table at the split. I'll get your take on what you think in a second, but I think we've got our first home Saturday 3 p.m. since Livy at the start of January, I believe. And secondly, our next two games, both at home against Falkirk and Aberdeen, are the day before both Rangers and Celtic play their respective fixtures. This weekend, Celtic Hibs on Sunday and Livy Rangers on Sunday. The following weekend, of course, is Rangers against Celtic. So a minimum of 16 points out of 18 to give us as good a chance as possible to win this league, says I. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's a punch total that most fans will be coming up with because I think they'll probably foresee the Motherwell game to be the trickiest
Yes.
of the six. I think that I'm almost inclined to start looking at it as every couple of games just now. I think because Celtic and Rangers are playing after us, it'd be interesting to see where we are once that Old Firm game's played because both at least one of them are going to drop points with that game. And although it was a bit tongue in cheek what I was talking about at the start of the episode, Hibs are one of the few teams I think that could go to Parkhead and get some form of a positive result there. I think unfortunately for Livingston, they've got their troubles to seek just now, and I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able to pull it off against Rangers. But on that pitch, you never know. So yeah, I still think we could be looking at a really positive situation again in a couple of weeks. I'm very confident that we'll get the results that we need against Falkirk and Aberdeen because of the situation that we're in, because of the situation that these two clubs find themselves in as well just now. I think it's in our favour to go ahead and sort of be the main aggressor in these two matches and chase the game and sort of, kind of just start for the off, just be really, really sort of intent and sort of intense and make sure that we play with that tempo that we've seen from us at times this season, but maybe not so much recently. So, yeah, I'm probably looking at it now in terms of just looking at the next two games rather than the next six. But 16 out of 18 is probably where most Hearts fans find themselves in terms of trying to make this prediction of what we'd like to see anyway.
And we can't get ahead of ourselves. Let's never mind take the next six. Let's never mind take the next two, as you've just said. Let's take the next one. What's different? What's changed from Falkirk coming to Tynecastle and bettering us in most areas of the pitch in the second half before going on to win on penalties? Given the fact that Hearts had played, I think, in midweek prior to that game and weren't fresh. So, what gives us the confidence that we start our journey to hopefully 18 points with getting all three and not like back in the day when Stephen Frail, when the Mad Vlad time was on, was asked. In fact, he wasn't even asked, he volunteered that the next 5 or 6 games, we're looking at least 15 points from these 6 games, and we ended up not winning any of them. Those were the bad old days. What gives us the thought process that Falkirk at home should be and hopefully will be 3 points against a good side?
Well, I think when you look back at that Falkirk game, there's a few caveats. I think, firstly, the Shankland injury right at the start of extra time really takes any wind out of our sails that we got from getting the late penalty. We then had to play Kabori and Kabangu up front, and there was just no chemistry there. The team didn't really know how to play to their strengths as well. So on Saturday, we've got a situation where we know we don't have Shankland. We can go into this game fresh and play the strongest available lineup that we have. Again, Falkirk have got documented issues at the back. Liam Henderson's been one of their standout performers this season. I think Dundee United showed at the weekend that Falkirk, for all their plaudits, still have frailties in terms of being able to play through them. And as much as I think they will be as comfortable on the ball as they've shown this season, I think that it's a game that we can squeeze and we can suffocate them in. And if we do that, I think we can win this game comfortably.
Prediction time. What do you got for me?
4-1 Hearts.
Oof. Do I recall a 4-1 against Falkirk within the past few years? Or a Scottish
Uh,
Cup tie before? 4-1
so we beat
rings a
them
bell at
4-1,
Tynecastle.
14-15 season, we beat them 4-1.
There
We
you
were
go.
3-0 up in the first sort of 40 minutes. I remember that one.
That's maybe the one I'm thinking. It's just a scoreline against a team that just rings a bell. And if there's one person that would know exactly what scoreline against that opposition has happened in the past, I'm speaking to him right now. Let's have a look. 4-1. Goal scorer for that one?
So Billy King got the third. No, Billy King got two goals.
Oh no,
Uh,
I meant for this weekend, but feel free
oh, sorry,
to. No,
sorry.
that's
I thought you were
fine.
asking about that game. Right, 4-1, and I think Chesnikov will get his first Hearts goal.
Okay, Jordan McGee, two for Billy King, Osman, so penalty. Botti B scored, that's like an anagram, scored a consolation for them, 4-1. That'll be the one I'm thinking about. There was a 4-2. Maybe that was one as well, 2007.
07-08. I remember
Yeah.
that one.
Kusanavicius, Zaliukas, Velitska, Nadia, 5. I remember the 5-0 on Boxing Day '05. That was the crazy season. 4-1. Here's another one I remember. Lawrence, Cahoon, Robbo,
Oh yeah.
1995. There you go.
We
Just
had
a
the heart shapes. We had the heart shapes
on the
in
field,
the pitch
on the field before we got told. Yeah,
before we got
just
told not to do it.
yeah. That's just sent me on a trip down memory lane. A 4-1 home prediction against Falkirk, which has happened a couple of times in the past 30 years. I'm keeping it simple. 2-0 Braga. I'm going for the brave Derek McInnes outlook on this. I'm going for the 4-3-3. I'm going for at them right from the start. A sign of intent. Put a marker down. I don't know how many opportunities we'll get going forward, certainly after the split, to play before the old firm. So let's make the most of it, put the pressure on them, and then sit back. And we can't enjoy them anymore when the other sides play. We did when Motherwell equalised, but by God, you go through it with Hearts, and you have to do exactly the same again with Rangers and Celtic games the following day. It's no good for the heart, this, Scotty.
No, no, it's not. But look, you'd still rather be here than not. You'd rather
Oh,
be
hugely.
in here than from the outside looking in, sending gifts of burst bubbles every time we happen to lose a game, and try to derive whatever satisfaction you can for that. So yeah, I think you'd rather be in this position again. We've said it pretty much from day one. This is the start of a long journey. This is not a flash in the pan season. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect going forward. I still think there'll be challenges when we have to make other changes within the squad or within the managerial setup over the next few seasons. But I do think this is us on the road to becoming a challenging side for the top two, trying to break away as a consistent third force in the game as well. So yeah, I think we should be enjoying it as much as we can. I know that when it comes to game day, it brings that tension and that. But to be fair to the fans, have been really good recently. They're trying to do their best. Obviously, the ultras have been trying to raise funds as well to help in terms of the displays and the tifos and that. So hopefully that will continue on Saturday. And yeah, I think everyone just needs to. I get it that the players haven't been perfect recently. The manager hasn't been perfect recently, but I think we've got to stick on their side, keep giving them their backing, regardless of any sort of personal preferences you've got over certain players. I think whoever's in that first 11 on Saturday, we've just got to get right behind them. We know that Falkirk will try and keep the ball, so it might not be as easy to get that early breakthrough because of that. But I think when it comes, I think it should lead to a comfortable day for us.
I'm glad you ended with the fans because we have our part to play. We've got a huge part to play. We don't want players not wanting the ball because they're frightened about what the noise from the stand is going to be. I don't think we get that between now and the end of the season. I'm pretty confident that we don't. I think we've come this far. We're all in this together, and there will be that extra patience when things aren't going well. If Falkirk do take the lead or Aberdeen or whatever, the Celtic fans, and I know a lot's been said since the Killie game about added time and everything like that, they kept singing and their team were 2-0 down. That's the kind of support just throughout from the first minute to the 90 minute. And I'm pretty certain we're going to get that. Not just the Falkirk game, but in the four home games before the split and the two afterwards. This is a team effort. And together, who knows where it'll take us. But we
Just
need to
just to
give the players
confirm,
the best possible chance.
we're looking for same energy as Celtic fans, not same songbook. Would that be right?
Indeed. I'm gonna leave you with the words of one of my favorite people, Mr. Scott Wilson. Let's get right behind the team, and just as importantly, let's make some noise. Bye for now.